And it was something that I was so proud to be a part of. It was an honor to be a part of that movie, not because it did so well. It was just the whole team, cast, crew, in the process of making it.
Hello, everyone. I hope you're all having a wonderful day today. My name is Talal, and you're listening to Popcorn and Soda Podcast, the show where we discuss all things movies, pop culture, and so much more. I want to thank each and every one of you for making me a small part of your day. On today's show, we're joined by a very special guest, a career that has spanned over 3 decades in the industry. You know him as Dennis Carradine, the man who shot Uncle Ben in Sam Raimi's Spider-Man, a film that is celebrating its 20th year anniversary and continues to inspire the next generation of filmmakers and comic book movie adaptations. On the show today, the very talented Michael Papajohn. How are you, Michael?
I'm good, Talal. Thanks for having me, man. It means a lot to spend some time with you on this special day.
Absolutely. And once again, thank you so much for coming to hang out. How have you been over these last 2 years, Michael? We're living in this ever changing, crazy world, especially for someone like yourself in the creative arts. What did the last 2 years look like for you personally?
Um, yeah, it's been a crazy 2 years with the pandemic and everything, but I don't live in California anymore. I actually live in Baton Rouge. So, how that's changed things for me personally, I've been here 10 years now. So I was in California for 27 years. But the last 2 years with the pandemic and COVID, I'm a documentary filmmaker also. So I still act and audition and I tape and I get a part here and there, but I was able to really move forward on some stories that I want to tell. And so I was able to stay really creative during the pandemic, which made things a lot easier for me and my family, actually.
Yeah, and that's so great to hear is that people found a way to adapt. And the way this industry works is you gotta have to find a way to adapt and evolve with the times because there was a time for quite a while there where everything was just shut down and people just weren't having work and productions were shut down, millions of dollars were being lost. But at the end of the day, I guess we all have our health. That's what we can be thankful for. And hopefully, this pandemic brought us all closer to just the little things in life that we take granted for.
Oh yeah, I really. You're right. I did have some really. My son is 14 now. Me and my wife been married 17 years, and it's just an opportunity to like enjoying the little things, being more conscious to the little things and more present to those little things. And I keep saying little things, but definitely slowed. I gotta. Um, I'm a little fast paced, and I can speed up, and that really made me slow down. So yeah, become very conscious to a lot of things. So absolutely.
Yeah, and then here's hoping as the world slowly reopens and returns to somewhat of a new normal or normal or whatever it may be, that we continue to see new filmmakers and people who probably were inspired to pick up a camera. Just nowadays, if you have a iPhone or a
Yeah.
smartphone or whatever, you can film a movie just on your phone. So here's hoping to see the next generation of creators that maybe got influence from this entire pandemic. So, before we deep dive into all things Spider Man, being a massive
Yeah.
sports fan myself, we have a really unique story. So, let's dive into that first. So, where does it all begin for you, Michael? What ultimately inspired you to be an actor?
Well, I wasn't looking to be an actor. I wasn't even looking to be in the movie business. I was just an athlete at Louisiana State University. I'm from Birmingham, Alabama originally. I went to a junior college in the Panhandle of Florida, Gulf Coast State College, and I bring up those schools just because every part of my life means a lot to me. Uh, but LSU, I played baseball at LSU, go Tigers, and it was my last semester at LSU, and they were shooting a movie in Baton Rouge called Everybody's All American with Dennis Quaid, and Taylor Hackford was the director, and they were looking for LSU athletes to be part of the football team, but weren't eligible in their sport. They're on their last semester. So, make a long story short, I was able to go out there and be part of the football team. and they said they would pay us more money if we took football hits or delivered football hits. And since I had like $13, $11 in my checking account, I said, hey, I'll take those football hits. And I started taking these football hits, and then I started doubling Dennis Quaid and taking those football hits. And I wore ski mask and worked with some great Hollywood stuntmen, Gary Davis, one of them, and Dennis Scott. And I was able to do a stunt with John Goodman and kill John Goodman. And then Taylor Hackford pulled me off to the side and said, hey, Papajohn, you're athletic and a good guy. I think you should be a Hollywood stuntman. So at the tail end of that story, I went played a year minor league baseball. I came back. Well, you know what? I had a really heart-to-heart with Skip Bertman, my head coach, because he coached Mickey Rourke and Andy Garcia, and he used to talk about Miami Vice all the time. And I look up to him a lot, and I had a heart-to-heart with him, and he said, hey, man, you should move out to Hollywood, give it a shot, do what you did at LSU, be a team player, your work ethic, and look for some great mentors and coaching. And so I went out to California.
It's interesting because you were drafted into the MLB, correct?
Yeah, I got drafted by the Rangers after junior college. And my arm was bothering me at the time, and I decided to go. It was the best thing that ever happened. I didn't go into the pro ball after my sophomore year at Gulf Coast. I decided to become an LSU Tiger, and that's one thing. LSU. I'm back here now. It's a university that keeps on giving back to me in so many ways.
Mm-hmm. Like growing up, did you want to just be a ball player, and was the dream to be an MLB player?
No, I love that question of growing up. I just wanted, man, I was running around in Birmingham, Alabama, barefooted, hot asphalt, humid, and I wanted to play football for Bear Bryant, the coach at Alabama. I visualized at 8, 9 years old, just wanting to be like Johnny Musso, was a famous running back at Alabama, and he had a tearaway jersey. And I was just running around the neighborhood fantasizing about just my imagination of playing for Bear Bryant. And what's crazy how I feel like that dream came true, because I played for the Bear Bryant of college baseball, which was Skip Bertman. The dream came true. It just came true in a different sport.
As I mentioned up top, Sam Raimi's Spider-Man is celebrating its 20th year anniversary today as we record this. And this movie, in so many ways, like spearheaded the biggest genre in the world today, the comic book films. If this didn't work, there is a chance that this boom of films that followed up may not have been made. And it's a billion-dollar industry today that is clearly just the most dominant form of media in all of Hollywood today. So let's start at the very top, Michael. What do you
Yeah.
recall the most about initially meeting Sam Raimi and reading for the role of Dennis Carradine?
Well, I actually did. I love telling the story because I met Sam on For Love of the Game. And I met Sam because it goes back to LSU. To make a long story short, they were casting For Love of the Game, and they were looking for real baseball players that could act. And I heard Augie Garrido was the technical advisor on For Love of the Game, and Augie passed on, but he was a famous coach at Texas University. And Kevin Costner and Augie were real good friends. And Kevin was going to be in For Love of the Game, and I heard Augie was a technical advisor. So I called Coach after I sent my tape to New York. I called Coach Bertman and asked him if he knew Augie Garrido, and he said, "Yeah, Papajohn, I know Augie." And I said, "Hey, Coach, pick up your bat phone," because that's what we used to call it. Pick up your bat phone. Could you give Augie a call and tell him I sent my tape to New York? And he goes, "Yeah, man, I'll call him. I'll call him." And 2 weeks later, I checked in the Waldorf Astoria, and I spent 7 weeks in New York playing Sam Tuttle. But that's how I met Sam Raimi. And Grant Curtis was Sam's assistant at the time, which went on to produce. And the tail end of that, For Love of the Game, a couple of years go by, and I get a call from Grant Curtis. I'm at LAX, and he's going, "Hey, Papajohn, we think we have a role we want you to read for. We think you might be right for it." And he said The Burglar, but I didn't read comic books, so I went to Sony and read for the part, and ended up getting the part. And it's a good story on me taking that phone call when I booked the part, because I was on The Animal with Rob Schneider, and Carr D'Angelo was a producer, and uh, David Avalon was also a cop. The reason I'm telling you this story is because I'm on the set and I get the call that I booked the part as the burglar. It's the first time I heard carjacker when I booked the part. I knew burglar. And I hung up the phone and I looked at David, another guy playing a cop. I go, man, I just got Spider-Man. He goes, really? What role are you playing? I go, I'm playing the carjacker burglar. He goes, his eyes got that big and he grabbed my arm and he took me to Carr D'Angelo. And Carr, he goes, David looked at Carr, goes, ask Papajohn what role he's playing. And Carr goes, what are you playing? In Spider-Man. I go, I'm playing the carjacker burglar. He goes, you're the reason Spider-Man becomes Spider-Man. And the
Yeah.
next day they gave me this book. Carr and David gave me this book and they go, you need to get Sam and Tobey McGuire to sign it. So what's cool, it's like show and tell. I did get Sam and
Oh,
Toby
look at that.
to sign it. And this is kind of reminiscing for me. I never pull this stuff out.
Mm-hmm.
But I also, what was special about Carr giving me this book, the producer and David, was that they go, Papajohn, you can study about your character in here, and he goes, because I didn't know anything about comic books. He goes, and you know what? At the end of the shoot, you should get Toby and Sam to sign it. So they gave me the book, and I actually got another book, two books, and at the end of the shoot, I got Sam and Toby to sign one for them also. So that was cool. And now Carr owns a comic book store in the valley somewhere on Ventura Boulevard. But that's and then when I would do the comic conventions, I would kids would come up to get a picture signed or something, and I would see how excited the parent was, and then I could tell how comic books shape people's lives, and I just started learning more and more about comic books, and then there was the pressure of the carjacker to do that role right. I felt the
Oh,
pressure, and I didn't want to play him as a good fellow. I wanted him to just be down and out, man, and he was down and out. He needed money, and he needed money to survive, and I just made him at the bottom. He was at the bottom. He was definitely at the bottom. The carjacker was. So
yeah. And that's interesting there, Michael, because when you watch you watch that entire scene from start to finish, I think you nailed it in terms of it's not your stereotypical, oh, some bum off the street that just wants to go like rob someone and then take the money. Like you can tell that there's layers to this character, right? Especially when Toby at the very end is about to he's asking him to give my uncle a chance, and he's asking for giving him a chance. So you can tell that he's not just like, as you mentioned, he's down and out. He's not trying to maybe be kill Uncle Ben, maybe not. I think it just happened to be in the circumstance of wrong place at the wrong time.
yeah, a lot of actors don't talk about who they study with and stuff. But Larry Moss was an acting coach, still a good friend of mine, but really changed my career on how to build a biography and how no, what didn't mean how much dialogue you have, how to build the biography of the
Mm-hmm.
character. And I learned that through Sam Raimi for Love of the Game. What Sam asked me on the set, how to build a biography for Sam Tuttle. So I knew going in, I'm going to build a biography, whether I had 5 lines or 50 lines, and so that first day on the set and just being so nervous in your trailer when you're waiting for them to call you out, I started looking at my character. My character's nervous. He's nervous. So,
Yeah.
but a lot of you can pick up those sides, and he could be a good fella, bad guy, and this was definitely different for me personally, and even the ups and downs of thanking Spider-Man. When I got in the elevator, I really thanked him as a friend. That you're helping me. I really appreciate it. There was a
Yeah.
sense of so it's cool.
I'm fascinated. You'd mentioned that in your mind you may have created some sort of a backstory for this character. Can you dive a little into that, or was it just as
Yeah.
basic as something as this guy's just down and out? I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Oh, he was really down and out. rent. Just couldn't even afford a gun. Just had to go to the pawn shop just to get the gun. Where he was on food, his studio apartment in New York, and how alone this guy was alone. That's one thing. He was abandoned and alone, and nothing. It's so funny that we're even talking about, because a lot of times you do interviews like this, you don't get to talk about the work, and
Mm-hmm.
that's what I really like to talk about. I like to talk about. I was in Alexander Technique, and I was studying with Larry Moss, and I was in voice work, and I know putting all that work into it, and then building the biography. But I showed up on the set that day, and the first time I walked on set, it was a "Who's there" thing, and I'm in the warehouse, and I had my gun like that, and they were putting the camera on me. Don Burgess, the DP, and they put the camera on me, and I haven't seen Sam yet, and he was like 40 yards away in Video Village, and he yelled out, "Papa John, I'm so happy you're playing this role," because he saw my face on the monitor. And that made me feel so good, to hear him scream over the set. And I'm not like tooting my own horn and being arrogant or anything. It was just, we worked together
No, of
before.
course.
I
Yeah.
showed up in front of the camera, and for him to say that, man, that was like a huge hug, walking on a set. But also of wanting to do it right, because then I just started learning what this comic book world is that I didn't know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you spoke about it just a bit earlier there, where you are the catalyst for Tobey Maguire's Peter Parker becoming Spider-Man, and it's a thread that continues on throughout the entire series. So let's talk about working with Tobey specifically in that scene. Here he is, this
Yeah.
amazing actor, and
Yeah.
you're pulling the emotional strings of this scene. You're bringing the worst out of him in this scene. What do you recall the most about working with Tobey?
Well, before even working with Toby, I just remember Sam first conversation on the set. It was, I said, he goes, "Hey, Papa John," he looked at me and said, "Papa John, your evil creates Spider-Man. Always remember that." And then he goes, "On this take, let me see Satan." I mean, I remember him saying that, that note there. Uh, uh, but jumping from working with someone like Sam that is so passionate, you could tell he wanted to do it right, and knew that story, and the way he communicated to you was like a kid in a way. He's just very excited about the story. And with Toby, I'm a big fan of Toby's, because his vulnerability, he could just talk to you, and then blink or look to the left and come back to you and totally be Peter Parker and show that vulnerability. His emotions were like on his fingertips. That's one thing I did notice right away, and it really brought that vulnerability to his character also.
Yeah, and it's so crazy to think that here we are, like 20 years later, talking about this movie, right? And
Yeah.
you have one of those infamous scenes where it's again the catalyst for what happens in the rest of the series, and it's a thread that he just keeps bringing up, and even in the newest Spider-Man, which we'll dive into a bit later, it's you really nailed that scene, Michael. You really are the standout in that scene, in my opinion, where you guys play off each other so well. So
Yeah.
what's the legacy of the original Spider-Man for you, and what is that specific role as Dennis Carradine done for you?
Oh, well, it's done for me personally, was just opened me up to a lot of opportunity in a very competitive business.
Oh,
It was the biggest break I've ever had, through For Love of the Game, working with Sam, and then a couple year and a half, 2 years later, well, really a year and a half, to be able to do Spider-Man. It just opened me up to a lot of bad guy roles, a lot of opportunity, being recognized. I mean, it's kind of crazy to go in a 7-Eleven in Los Angeles in West LA and have 7 high school kids look at you, and like the good looking quarterback guy goes, "Why did you do it?" And I went, "What?" He goes, "Why did you kill Uncle Ben?" I go, "Come on, man, it's a movie." And but there was no build up to that conversation at the 7-Eleven. It was just, but those are most things that were happening to me. So what did it do for me? It, it's about relationships in the industry, and and I built a lot of relationships through it. I learned a lot, and it was something that I was so proud to be a part of. It was an honor to be a part of that movie, not because it did so well. It was just the whole team, cast, crew, in the process of making it. And then I didn't go to the premiere. I got invited. I went to the cast and crew screening, and I remember Grant Curtis giving a speech to the cast and crew at the screening, at the cast and crew screening. It was such, what he said was so nice, and it thanked everybody. And um, and then the reason I mentioned the premieres in 2007, I did go to the premiere, but you just talk about being a part of it and the success of the movie, really launched. I mean, it was the first one to really, I think, first one to really take everything else after
Oh yeah.
that film. Everything else went to a different level. And I think that was the first one, correct? Or was Wolverine like one of the first ones? Or
Like I think Bryan Singer's X-Men came out like a year or so before that, and that was like the first movie that kind of had a more mature tone to it. Because years prior was all like the Joel Schumacher Batman and Robin with like Mr. Freeze and Arnold, but like it was X-Men and Spider-Man. Those are the two movies that took this serious and actually had top filmmakers, and they put a lot of money, and more importantly, they actually put time and effort into the story, into the core of these characters, and I think that's why it resonates so much.
I say it as a joke, but I mean, when I watched my son when he became 4 years old, when he was 4 years old, I showed him Spider Man for the first time, and man, we're on the couch, and I was living in California at the time. I'm living in Baton Rouge now, but he was at the he's at the couch watching me, and then you're me, and he's watching me first time on screen. Carjacker. Then he looks at me, then he looks at the carjacker, and he looks at me and looks at the carjacker, and he couldn't believe it. I mean, he goes, it was just the look in his eyes, and now he's 14, and we talk about Spider-Man. We went to the last Spider-Man together, and it's that father-son thing that's been really, really cool for me. With great power comes great responsibility. I dropped them off at school today. Excelsior. We were. It's really, really cool stuff. Really
Well,
cool.
it's a gift. It's the gift that keeps on giving, right? It's you did this role
Absolutely.
20 years ago, and now you have this bond with your child, and I think that's the best thing about this movie and this universe is that it's so universal. And then there's something
Yeah.
about these characters, whether it's like Spider-Man, Batman, whatever, the Marvel Cinematic Universe. People are drawn to these movies one way or another, and I think Spider-Man is just like the crown jewel of that. So staying on the topic of
Yeah, but
Spider-Man,
I did learn in the Comic Con when the father son, I really saw the father and the son come up to the table for the autograph, and then the father being more excited than the son, and that's where I went, oh man, the father read the comic book, the father was into this story, and it's shaped a lot of kids' lives, reading these comic books at
hmm
a young age. And then full circle, I didn't read much when I was growing up. I was into sports, had some learning disabilities as far as reading, and sports. And then to be able to take my son to the comic book store years later, and to watch him get into it when he was 6, 7, 8, 9 years old. Really, really cool.
Yeah. And like again, staying on the topic of Spider-Man, I think it's fascinating that something a lot of people may not know is you're also in the Spider-Man reboot with Andrew Garfield, the Amazing Spider-Man. Now, do you
Yeah.
recall that process with working alongside Mark Webb and the team? Was that almost as like an Easter egg from the original to the new film, or did they know that you were the carjacker from the original film? How did that go about?
I don't know if they knew. I mean, all I know is Stan Lee and me are the only actors in that Spider-Man and the very first Spider-Man, you know. So I uh, it was really cool to be a part of that. Andy Armstrong, the stunt coordinator, got me in on the audition, and I read for it and showed up on the set, and uh, played limo driver, and did my job and got out of there.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? Like Did you have any like feelings of just memories rushing back when you just first got on set? You're like, now I'm doing another Spider-Man movie after three Spider-Man movies that are wildly successful, and now they're relaunching this universe. And sure, maybe it may be a limo driver, but you're still part of the movie.
Oh no, just to be a part of that movie, yes, in the black suit, tie, walking on that set, knowing that you're in a film that that uh, there's a lot of weight to that story and being a part of it, and being able to do it again, playing someone else. That was interesting, actually, real interesting because it was definitely a shift. That's for sure.
Mm. I'll take that at face value as whatever you meant by that.
Right.
Yeah. Well, I gotta ask you this, and you know this was coming. One of the biggest movies of all time, Spider-Man: No Way Home. Have you had a chance to watch it?
Yeah, man. I went to the movie opening night. I bought tickets in advance, and me and my son went to the opening night. It was packed theater, people yelling at the screen, and you know, some people dressed up as Spider Man, and to feel that energy, you just here in Baton Rouge at a sold out theater on opening night was really neat for me and my son. Yeah, and I loved the movie. It was great.
Were you a fan of like the new incarnation of Spider-Man with Tom Holland? I know you mentioned you weren't a comic book fan growing up, but are you a fan of the new Spider-Man movies Marvel and Sony have been making together?
Yeah, absolutely. Garfield, Holland, watching them all with my son. Uh, um, all along, I've been watching them. I don't study them like my son does, but a fan of all the Spider Mans.
Well, it's funny. Like again, you're just this thread that just never ends. Even in this movie, what was your reaction when you saw that scene where Tobey McGuire returns and he talks about how the carjacker. He talks about, hey, I followed the guy who gunned down my uncle. It didn't make me a better man. The anger I had. Did you have a bit of a smile on your face when you're
Oh,
like,
come
hey,
on,
man?
man. I did. Man, my son, we were elbowing each other on like the 10th row. We just started elbowing each other that they were talking about the carjacker and the burglar and uh, yeah, and Uncle Ben and the history of that. So yes, me and my son got a big kick out of it.
Sam Raimi now is doing the Doctor Strange movie that's coming out, which I'm just so excited to see, and I'm sure you are as well, along with your son. Would you like to see Sam Raimi come back to the world of Spider-Man now that we've kind of reintroduced Tobey Maguire to this new generation? Do you think there's more stories to be told with Toby, Kristen Don, Sam?
Oh yeah, I think anytime Sam Raimi wants to come back and tell a story, people are going to want to see it. Whatever that might be. I knew not to shift conversation. He was going to do Bermuda Triangle for a long time, and the movie never happened. But anything he wants to do, I think people are going to be interested in watching. And if that's Spider Man, but if that's the movie coming out this weekend, or the movie coming out next year, or the year after that, a lot of big Sam Raimi fans, and I'm definitely one of them. He's a great storyteller. He's very, very passionate. And I remember when I got the Carjacker. Whenever I worked with a new director, I always watched all their films, and and I got to watch the behind the scenes and the director's commentary, because then you can learn a lot about the filmmaker
Right,
before you show
right.
up on the set. In the Evil Deads and Bruce Campbell and Ted Raimi, and these guys are from Michigan, and he's using his same car he used when he first did his first independent film ever, and it showed the grind of Sam Raimi. So I had a lot of respect for him as a filmmaker and how he got there.
Yeah, and I think you nailed it there. It's just that these great directors put their stamp on these characters, and that's the thing with these characters. They're so universal that there's gonna be interpretations. These characters are gonna outlive everyone, right? There's just gonna be more and more interpretations of it, and a character like Spider-Man, every generation has their own version of it, and now with someone like Tom Holland who just absolutely just killed it in the role, I'm sure they're already probably thinking about the next wave of Spider-Man movies that are gonna come out.
Oh yeah, I think it's just going to go on and on and on till the break of dawn. I mean,
Yeah.
I think that's a song, but they will.
Well, yeah, it's
Yeah,
It's the
they
modern
will.
day Greek mythology, right? These are
Yeah.
these superheroes, these comic characters. This is what kids are learning about growing up nowadays, and this is again just these characters are just larger than life.
Yeah, but there's something about the Spider-Man being vulnerable and him, struggling through school and trying to fit
Yeah.
in and then handling how to be a superhero and great power comes great responsibility and just that whole thing. It's I love that saying too. I use it
Hmm.
a lot actually.
As we wrap up our conversation, let's bring the conversation back to you, Michael. I know you mentioned
Yeah.
earlier on that you're a documentarian and you like to work on documentaries. So, what are some of the projects you're currently working on?
Well, I love Larry Moss was a big influence on me picking up a camera 25 years ago. Nick Broomfield, filmmaker, documentarian, was a big influence. Watched his documentaries. I got to see Nick Broomfield on Third Street Promenade. I went up to him and he's an English guy. I go, "What's up, Nick?" I've been, he goes, yeah. I go, "Hey, Nick." He goes, "What's up, mate?" I go, "Yeah, I'm Michael Papajohn. You don't know me, but I've been watching your films." And um, I was the only guy that knew who he was on Third Street Promenade.
Yeah.
It was very crowded, but I started filming Larry Moss for years in his acting class and then put the camera on other subjects. And then I've been documenting Skip Burtman, my coach for the last 4 years. Um, but I like the world of unscripted. I do like there's with all this old content that I have, and I have a producing partner, and we're looking at uplifting content on coaches, and I love the. There's so many different genres, but you can you can pitch subjects. You can build. What I'm excited about is you build a sizzle reel and a deck, and you just pitch ideas uh, to those Hollywood folks to sell it to a network and get it sold and but there's also passion projects of stories I want to tell. We could stick a GoPro on a windshield and mic someone, and you go for a drive and you tell stories. But I have a lot of different things. A lot of just say I got a lot of logs in the fire of things, stories I want to tell. I'm big on hyperbaric oxygen therapy. I didn't know I was going to say that, but I've been filming that whole process of people, hyperbaric oxygen therapy, helping people. Uh, I love that subject. That's just, but I also love the coaches, uplifting content, and there's something I've been working on with the independent wrestling. What goes on with independent wrestling, and we talked about Universal, a lot of Universal stories and stories, things that happen in small Southern towns really intrigues me, you know, and stories, secrets, good and bad. There's just a lot of stuff, and I live in the South now, and there's just a lot of things that like what you talked about, man. Here's your production can be this phone right here. I mean, you can stick this in front of someone, get an interview, and you can actually use that in your documentary. And that's what we talked about. It's amazing what filmmakers can do today with an iPhone and
Hmm.
the opportunity. The opportunity when I was first coming up, like you wanted to get in a film festival or a passion project,
Yeah.
but now it can drop and it's not a local deal; it's global, and people can
Oh yeah.
see. And I'm more personally, I like documentaries more than I do narrative films. I tend to go more to the documentary. But I enjoy working on narrative films and maybe produce or direct a narrative film down the road sometime. But my heart is documentary just because the authenticity of it and what you can do, and not only what you can do, the power of storytelling and how you can change people's lives with that storytelling. And Larry Moss used to say in acting class, if you quit this business, we lose your story. And I always remembered that because I've seen a lot of talented actors quit, and then I've seen some do really well, and the ups and downs of being an artist and trying to make money doing it too. As far as a documentarian, so but I never really talk much about that right now, what we just talked about it, but it's kind of good to get it out there, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's great, Michael. I think that there's so many different mediums, there's so many different voices. And as you mentioned, now you being in the South, we think of Hollywood, the glitz and glamour, the big budget blockbusters and everything, but entertainment, media, stories are all around us. And it's all about how you use the tools that are given to you to actually go out and shoot these projects. So I'm really excited to see what's next for you and for everyone just listening. That's please do check out Michael's projects when they come out. Michael, where can we find you on social media so as more information comes out, people can check you out?
Yeah, just michaelpapajohn.com and on Twitter, Michael Papajohn. And
As you wrap up with Michael Papajohn, it is now time for a segment I call the final act. Michael, I'm going to ask you 10 rapid fire questions about your likes and your dislikes. I just want the first thing that pops in your mind. But here's the catch. I'm going to give you 1 minute to try to get through all 10 questions. You up for it?
okay, I'm up for it. Let's go, man.
Movies or TV shows?
Movies,
Theater or watch at home?
theater,
Favorite movie?
Rocky,
One,
Goodfellas,
one sequel better than the original.
uh, Rocky,
Your favorite role?
Carjacker,
Favorite Spider-Man?
first Spider-Man.
Summer or fall?
We got to go with fall.
Does pineapple belong on pizza?
No,
Who's your favorite to go all the way in the World Series this year?
the Phillies,
And lastly, describe your life in the creative arts in one word.
passion, man, heart.
Bam, you killed it at that. I had my little timer up here. We got through it in like 45, 50 seconds. So you were
Okay.
awesome. And Mike, thank you so much for being a guest on the show today. And thank you for your contributions to the world of cinema. The original Spider-Man is one of my all-time favorite movies, and you play a part in creating the love that I have for that film. I wish you all the best, and I look forward to having you back on the show to discuss your next project.
So, thanks again for having me, man. It was a pleasure. Thank you, brother.